Hello and welcome to today's discussion on the GS paper 1. See, first question was, in what ways did the naval mutiny prove to be the last nail in the coffin of the British colonial administration? Now this is a 10 markers question for you, for which you should write 100 words and not more than 100 words, and at max it could be 150 words but not more than this. Crossing this limit means deduction in your marks. Now understand this. The Rin Mutiny occurred in February 1946 against the ill treatment by the British officials and in favor of the Azad Hind Fauj prisoners. This is the simple reason why the Rin Mutiny occurred. Now this is your introduction again. The naval mutiny proved to be the last coffin in the British colonial administration because number 1, it was a direct attack to the prestige of the British. Very important. Number 2, Rin mutiny weakened the British control over the Indian army. Number 3, Rin mutiny showed the rising nationalism amongst the native Indian army. Next, the Rin mutiny supported the Indian national movement, which was not imagined by the British government. Last but not the least, in the conclusion, hence that the Rin mutiny was the last nail in the coffin of the British colonial administration. Next, what were the key objectives of the social reform movement? See, the question has two parts: the key objectives of the social reform movement in India and highlight some of the key reform movements. See, first of all, start with the basic intro and just write the key objectives of the social reform movements are to get rid of the superstitious beliefs and priestly dominance, emancipation of the women by promoting widow remarriage, prevent child marriage, and sati, women's education, promoting women's education. Next, to prevent caste discrimination, to promote monotheism or the worship of one god, and to promote education. And with this respect, the reform movements were Brahmo movement to promote monotheism, Arya Samaj movement to promote education. I hope you remember the DAP school or the Dayanand Anglo-Vedic school. We have the Arvipuram movement, Arvi, Aruvipuram movement by Narayan Guru against the caste discrimination. Last but not the least, we had the Derosian movement for the women's emancipation. See, in all this, you can find there is a role of the women's emancipation, but I have just segregated it. Next, highlight the cause behind the 1857 revolt and highlight its major weakness. See, I have written in this manner, but you shouldn't write in this manner. Rather, first of all, you should write that the major cause are number 1 is the religious cause. Within the religious cause, first we have angelization, that is conversion of the Hindu to Christian. Next, overseas service, that is the Hindus were forced to do the overseas service, as a result of which what happened that they were outcasted within their own community. Last but not the least was the mixing of the cow bone powder in the food. See, basically the British very idea was that mixing of such powder would enable them to be more stronger, but actually this hurt their religion. Administrative cause was the doctrine of lapse and the subsidiary alliance. Doctrine of lapse introduced by Dalhousie, as per which a person or the native ruler who does not has a male heir would automatically would no more be the owner of his or her kingdom. Subsidiary alliance was nothing but it was introduced by Lord Wellesley, as per which a particular native ruler was bound to have a certain or bound to maintain a certain number of companies forces at his own expense. So what happened was that while doctrine of lapse took away their territory, the subsidiary alliance almost took their territory by making them completely dependent upon the British. Economic costs, the land revenue policies such as your permanent settlement, Ryotwari settlement, they were completely, what they did was that they were arbitrary, and that it completely deteriorated the condition of your farmers. Kunwar Singh, as you remember, of Bihar was the one who revolted during the 1857. Again, the forest laws. These forest laws were very harsh for the people, as they did not allow the forest rights that were earlier given to the people. What was the immediate cause? The immediate cause was the use of the greased rifle, The greased rifle was the immediate cause that led to the 1857 revolt. But what were the major weakness? The major weakness number one was lack of coordination. See, the total revolt was not coordinated at all. Means there was very lack of communication amongst the revolted members. Next was that the outdated weapon. They though they most of the sepoys they had certain guns, but again those were very outdated. Next, the lack of centralized leadership. See, in this during the 1857, basically they looked upon Bahadur Shah for the leadership. But Bahadur Shah, in fact, what he did was that in the beginning of it itself, he started negotiating with the British, and he did not wanted to take up the leadership. Rather, he was forced to take up the leadership, and that did not work well. Last but not least, it did not get support from the landlords. See, during that time, what happened was that there were landlords, and these landlords never supported the movement, rather, they supported the British. As a result of which, this ultimately failed. Next question was, discuss the development in the literature and the science during the Gupta, in literature and science during the Gupta period. See, basically, I would like you to write the intro. The intro is nothing. The development made in literature and the science in the Gupta period are as follows. It simple means that from this introduction itself, from the question itself, you are going to derive the introduction. First of all, in literature, we have the Kalidasa who wrote the Meghadutam. We have the Amarasima who wrote the Amarakosha. Both were the court poets of Chandragupta too. Again, we had during this time the Bhagavata Purana were developed. Now let's look into the science part. In the science part, in the field of medicine, we had the three trio, that is the Charaka, Susruta, and Bhagavata. Charaka developed the medicines, and he wrote the criticism, that is in his theory or in his text, the Charaka Samhita. He mentioned about all those medicines. Susruta was an expert in surgery. He not only developed the surgical instrument but also conducted surgery with respect to cataract and other kind of diseases. Next, Bhagavata. Bhagavata developed again. He was a specialized in medicine, and during this time he wrote the Ashtanga Samagraha, or this is called Ashtanga Samagraha, or it is called Eight Anthology of Medicine. Again, in the field of mathematics, there was development in algebra and decimal system. Though algebra and decimal system had been in existence in the past, but during this period there was also considerable development. Now, with this four question, I want you to please analyze them properly and hence do rectify your mistakes. Thank you, and that will be all for today's class.